What if I told you that long before the pyramids of Egypt rose from the desert sands, long before we believed complex societies were even possible, there existed a place that would completely transform our understanding of human history? Picture this. 11,000 years ago, when most humans were simply trying to survive day by day, nomadic hunters gathered in what is now southeastern Turkey. Without metal tools, without the wheel, without even permanent settlements, these ancient people accomplished something extraordinary. They built a monument so sophisticated, so precisely engineered, that it would force us to rewrite the entire timeline of civilization. Welcome to Göbekli Tepe, the archaeological site that will make you question everything you thought you knew about our ancestors. Standing there among the massive stone pillars, some weighing as much as 10 tons, you can almost hear the whispers of those ancient builders. How did they move these enormous stones? What drove them to create such intricate carvings of foxes, birds, and mysterious symbols? What secrets lie beneath the layers of earth that deliberately buried this sacred place? The most mind-boggling fact: Göbekli Tepe was built around 9,500 years before Christ. That's 7,000 years before Stonehenge, and predates the Great Pyramid of Giza by a staggering 6,500 years. Let that sink in for a moment. This isn't just any ancient ruin. This is a place that forces archaeologists to reconsider what early humans were capable of. It suggests that the need to gather for spiritual or community purposes may have actually driven the development of agriculture and permanent settlements, not the other way around as we've always believed. You're about to embark on a journey that challenges the foundation of what we understand about human civilization. A journey that will transport you to a time when our ancestors, though lacking in technology, possessed profound wisdom and organizational skills that modern scholars are still struggling to comprehend. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of humanity's greatest achievements, hit that like button, subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel, and make sure you don't miss a single episode of this mind-bending adventure through time. Nestled among the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey lies a place that isn't just another dot on an archaeologist's map. Göbekli Tepe is nothing short of a time machine that catapults us 12,000 years into the past, to an era when woolly mammoths still roamed the earth and humans were just beginning to tame the first wolves into companions. The story of its discovery is almost as fascinating as the site itself. It was 1994 when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt first set foot on this unassuming hill. Local shepherds had long considered the strange stones jutting from the ground as nothing more than farming obstacles. Some even believed they marked ancient graves best left undisturbed. Schmidt, however, saw something the others had missed. Where previous surveys had dismissed the stones as medieval cemetery markers, he recognized the telltale signs of something far, far older. "I knew within minutes," Schmidt later recalled, "that I had found the most important site of my career." Latte, what makes this revelation so groundbreaking? Imagine for a moment the world of 12,000 years ago. At that time, according to everything we thought we knew, humans were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers. Small bands of people moving from place to place, following herds, gathering wild plants, and living in temporary shelters. They weren't supposed to be capable of monumental architecture. They weren't supposed to have complex religious symbols. And they certainly weren't supposed to organize massive communal projects. Yet here was Göbekli Tepe, with its perfectly carved T-shaped pillars arranged in precise circles, some standing 19 feet tall and weighing as much as a modern school bus. The stonework wasn't crude or primitive. It was masterful. Relief carvings depicted foxes, boars, snakes, and birds with remarkable artistry and attention to detail. This was a revelation that shook archaeology to its core. Klaus Schmidt spent the next 18 years of his life excavating the site until his death in 2014, uncovering less than 10% of what lies beneath the surface. and what he found forced us to completely rewrite our understanding of prehistoric societies. Before Göbekli Tepe, we believed civilization followed a neat, logical progression. First humans settled down, then they developed agriculture, then they built permanent structures, and only then did they create complex societies with specialized labor, art, and religion. Göbekli Tepe flips this narrative on its head. Here was undeniable evidence of a society capable of ambitious architectural projects and rich symbolic expression thousands of years before the development of writing, metallurgy, or even pottery. These people weren't using metal tools. They carved these massive stones using only flint implements. They didn't have wheels or domesticated beasts of burden to move these enormous pillars. They used nothing but human coordination and ingenuity. Perhaps most astonishingly, the builders of Göbekli Tepe eventually and deliberately buried their creation under thousands of tons of soil and debris. It's as if they wanted to preserve it, or perhaps to ritually kill it, ensuring it would remain untouched until humanity was ready to rediscover its message across the vast gulf of time. Today, nearly 3 decades after Schmidt's discovery, Göbekli Tepe continues to challenge everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. And as archaeologists continue to unearth its secrets, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Our ancestors were far more sophisticated, far more organized, and far more ambitious than we ever gave them credit for. Picture this: small bands of hunter-gatherers roaming the landscapes of ancient Anatolia, tracking wild game, gathering seasonal plants, and living in temporary shelters. These weren't people with metal tools or domesticated animals. They didn't have writing systems or complex mathematics, and yet, defying everything we thought possible, these were the master builders of Göbekli Tepe. For decades, archaeologists clung to a comforting narrative that monumental architecture could only emerge from settled agricultural societies with surplus food, specialized labor, and hierarchical organization. Göbekli Tepe shatters this certainty into 1,000 pieces. The evidence tells us something remarkable. These builders weren't farmers. They were nomadic hunters, living in a world still vibrant with megafauna like aurochs and lions. Bone analysis from nearby sites confirms they primarily ate wild game. Plant remains show no evidence of domesticated crops. This was a society that lived by following herds and seasonal resources, not by tending fields. Now try to wrap your mind around this mind-boggling feat. Small groups of perhaps 20 to 30 people, wielding nothing more sophisticated than flint tools and fiber ropes, somehow quarried, transported, and erected massive stone pillars weighing up to 10 tons each. That's equivalent to the weight of 2 modern elephants. How did they do it? We're still not entirely sure. But the evidence suggests these nomadic bands must have temporarily come together in much larger numbers, perhaps hundreds or even thousands of people during specific seasons, like an ancient Burning Man festival, but with a purpose far beyond celebration. They were building something meant to last for eternity. Here's where it gets even more fascinating. Look closely at these stone pillars, and you'll notice they're not merely structural supports. Each one tells a story. Carved into their surfaces are foxes with bared teeth, scorpions with raised tails, wild boars charging forward, vultures swooping down, and serpents slithering across the stone. These weren't random decorations or simple artistic expressions. They were a complex, symbolic language carved in stone. One pillar shows a net of snakes surrounding a pregnant woman giving birth. Another depicts a headless human figure amidst a circle of vultures, perhaps recording an ancient sky burial ritual. These images speak to us across 12 millennia, whispering secrets of how these people understood their place in the cosmos. The placement of these animal carvings doesn't appear random either. Certain animals consistently appear on specific pillars in precise locations within the stone circles. This suggests a deliberate arrangement, perhaps a star map, a calendar, or a representation of their spiritual worldview that we've yet to fully decode. And here's something truly remarkable that archaeologists discovered. Many of these carved figures were deliberately positioned to be visible only to someone standing in particular spots within the stone circles. It's as if the builders created an ancient virtual reality experience where moving through the space would reveal different images and tell different parts of a larger story. Evidence of feasting has been found at the site too. Massive deposits of animal bones, particularly gazelle and aurochs, suggesting communal meals on an impressive scale. Perhaps these gatherings were times of knowledge exchange and alliance building between different hunter-gatherer bands, who normally ranged across separate territories. Who led these construction efforts? Was it a charismatic spiritual leader, a council of elders? Or perhaps these nomadic peoples had developed forms of cooperative organization we've never imagined possible without permanent settlements. The silent stones keep many of their secrets, but they've already taught us one invaluable lesson. Never underestimate the capabilities of our ancestors. These invisible builders, these first architects of monumentality, remain largely anonymous to history. We may never know their names or their faces, but through the magnificent structures they left behind, they speak to us still, challenging us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about human potential. For generations, we've been told a simple story about our ancient ancestors. They were primitive beings, consumed by the daily struggle to find food, avoid predators, and simply stay alive. Their existence was brutal and short, leaving little time for anything beyond the basics of survival. But Göbekli Tepe whispers a different truth across the millennia, a truth that has sparked what archaeologists now call the silent revolution in our understanding of prehistoric humanity. When Klaus Schmidt and his team began uncovering the massive stone pillars and intricate carvings, they weren't just finding an unexpected architectural achievement. They were uncovering evidence of a rich inner life that our hunter-gatherer ancestors weren't supposed to have. Think about what it means to create something like Göbekli Tepe. These weren't simple shelters built for protection against the elements. These weren't tools crafted for hunting or gathering. These massive stone circles, with their T-shaped pillars reaching toward the sky, served no practical purpose in the conventional sense of survival. Instead, they tell us something profound. Our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were contemplating, they were creating, they were reaching for something beyond the material world. The layout of the stone circles at Göbekli Tepe suggests careful planning and astronomical knowledge. Some archaeologists believe the positioning of certain pillars aligns with stellar events that would have been visible 11,000 years before Christ. Imagine these ancient people, gathered in their stone sanctuary, watching as particular stars rose over specific carved pillars at precise times of the year. This wasn't just decoration. This was a calendar, an observatory, a place to track the rhythm of the cosmos. Evidence found at the site reveals something else remarkable: feasting on a massive scale. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of animal bones, carefully butchered and cooked, suggesting communal meals that brought together far more people than the typical hunter-gatherer band of 20 to 30 individuals. Some estimates suggest hundreds or even thousands might have gathered at Göbekli Tepe for special occasions. What were these gatherings for? The evidence points to complex ritual activities. Small clay figurines found nearby suggest symbolic thinking. Specialized areas within the stone circles indicate spaces reserved for particular ceremonies. Strange acoustic properties of the stone chambers suggest sound may have played an important role in whatever transpired there. Here's something truly fascinating. Chemical analysis of stone vessels found at the site has revealed traces of a fermented beverage, quite possibly the earliest evidence of alcohol production in human history. These ancient people weren't just building monuments, they were brewing beer to share during their gatherings. And consider this mind-bending possibility. Many archaeologists now believe Göbekli Tepe may have been a pilgrimage site. People might have traveled from hundreds of miles away to participate in whatever sacred ceremonies took place there. This implies not just sophisticated spiritual beliefs, but networks of communication and cultural sharing spanning vast areas, all among supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers. This reveals a social organization far more complex than we ever imagined possible without agriculture or cities. Someone had to plan these monuments, someone had to direct the labor, someone had to maintain the knowledge of astronomical alignments and sacred symbols across generations. What Göbekli Tepe ultimately proves is that our ancestors were fully modern humans in their cognitive abilities, their spiritual yearnings, and their social complexity. Long before they built permanent settlements or domesticated plants and animals, the human spirit, with all its creativity and wonder, didn't emerge from civilization. Civilization emerged from the human spirit. Did you know that these nomadic hunters built a site older than the Egyptian pyramids? The Great Pyramid at Giza was constructed around 4,500 years ago, while Göbekli Tepe stands at nearly 12,000 years old, making it more than 7,000 years older than those iconic Egyptian monuments. If you're enjoying this journey through humanity's hidden past, please hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel for more incredible stories that rewrite history. Let us know in the comments what surprised you most about this ancient revolution that changed humanity forever. For all the revelations Göbekli Tepe has offered us, this ancient wonder holds even more secrets than answers. With each stone uncovered, each carving revealed, archaeologists find themselves facing a growing list of questions that continue to baffle the scientific community. Let's start with perhaps the most obvious puzzle. How exactly did they build it? These massive T-shaped pillars, some standing 19 feet tall and weighing up to 10 tons, weren't just dropped into place. They were quarried from solid bedrock about 300 yards away, carefully shaped with nothing but stone tools, somehow transported uphill, and then precisely positioned in circular formations. Modern engineers using computer simulations estimate it would take at least 500 people working together to move a single pillar. That's far more than the 20 or 30 individuals typically found in hunter-gatherer bands. So how did they coordinate such massive efforts? Did they develop some ingenious method we haven't figured out? Or does this suggest a social organization far more sophisticated than anything we've previously attributed to hunter-gatherers? One fascinating theory proposes they might have used wooden sledges running over logs, with the entire structure lubricated by wet clay. But even this would require extraordinary coordination and leadership, something we've always associated with later, more hierarchical societies. Then there's the mystery of the tools. Excavations have revealed only stone implements, no metal, not even primitive copper. The precision of the carvings on these pillars is remarkable. Deep reliefs of foxes with sharp teeth, spiders with articulated legs, vultures with spread wings. How did they achieve such artistic sophistication with such limited tools? Some archaeologists suggest they might have used obsidian blades, which can be knapped to an edge sharper than modern surgical steel. But perhaps the deepest mystery surrounds the purpose of Göbekli Tepe itself. What exactly happened there? The evidence points to ritual activities, but of what nature? The abundance of animal bones suggests feasting. But was this purely celebratory, or were these sacrificial offerings? The absence of human burials is curious. This wasn't a cemetery, despite its monumental nature. Some of the carved scenes hint at darker practices. One infamous pillar, nicknamed the Vulture Stone, shows a headless human figure surrounded by birds of prey. Is this depicting an actual sky burial ritual, where the dead were exposed to scavenging birds? Or is it symbolic of a spiritual transformation, the soul taking flight after death. Equally perplexing is the layout itself. The stone circles were built in layers, with older ones deliberately buried and new ones constructed above them. Why bury such monumental achievements? Was this a ritual killing of sacred spaces? Did beliefs change over time, requiring new configurations? Or was there some practical reason we've yet to understand? Then there's the timing. Göbekli Tepe was constructed just as the last ice age was ending, around 9,500 years before Christ. This period saw dramatic climate change, with warming temperatures transforming the landscape from open steppe to woodland. Wild grain began to flourish in the region. Was Göbekli Tepe somehow connected to these environmental changes? Was it built to appease gods believed responsible for this shifting world? The site was ultimately abandoned and deliberately buried around 8,000 years before Christ. Roughly the same time, agriculture began spreading throughout the region. Is this coincidence, or are these events somehow connected? Did the rise of farming make the old hunter-gatherer rituals obsolete? Or did the massive communal efforts required to build and maintain Göbekli Tepe actually push people toward farming as a more efficient way to feed large gatherings? Perhaps most tantalizing of all is what remains undiscovered. Ground-penetrating radar surveys indicate that what we've uncovered so far, approximately 5% of the total site, may be just the beginning. At least 16 more stone circles lie buried, waiting to be excavated. What new mysteries, what new revelations might they hold? In the words of the late Klaus Schmidt, who dedicated his life to uncovering these mysteries, Göbekli Tepe is not a puzzle to be solved. It's a mystery to be savored. Each stone pillar, each carved figure, each buried layer tells part of a story whose full meaning may never be completely understood. And in that uncertainty lies the true wonder of archaeology, the humbling recognition that some aspects of our human journey may remain forever just beyond our grasp. When we think of ancient temples, our minds often drift to the towering ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the majestic pyramids of Egypt, or the ornate sanctuaries of Greece and Rome. But what if I told you that long before any of these famous structures, thousands of years before the first stone of Stonehenge was placed, our ancestors had already created a sacred space of such sophistication that it would redefine our understanding of spiritual architecture. Göbekli Tepe stands alone as humanity's first known temple, a sacred gathering place built in a time when conventional wisdom says such things shouldn't have been possible. Radiocarbon dating places its construction around 9,500 years before Christ, making it the oldest known monumental religious complex in human history. But what exactly makes archaeologists so confident that this was a temple and not something else? The evidence is compelling. First, there's the layout itself, concentric rings of massive T-shaped pillars, carefully positioned to create enclosed spaces with specific sightlines and acoustic properties. This wasn't a residential area. No signs of permanent habitation have been found. It wasn't a defensive structure. The layout would make little sense for protection. It wasn't a marketplace. The design emphasizes inward focus rather than open exchange. Instead, everything about Göbekli Tepe points to ritual purpose. The massive pillars themselves appear to be stylized human figures. Look closely, and you'll see they have arms carved in relief on their sides, with hands meeting across the front of the pillar as if clasped over a belly. Some even have loincloths carved at their base. These weren't just structural supports. They appear to represent ancestors or deities standing in silent witness to whatever ceremonies unfolded within their circles. The positioning of these stone sentinels creates natural focal points and processional pathways. Standing in the center of one of these circles, you would be surrounded by these towering figures, their carefully carved animal reliefs visible at eye level. The experience would have been immersive and awe-inspiring, not unlike walking into a great cathedral today. What rituals took place here? We may never know with certainty, but tantalizing clues remain. Residue analysis from stone vessels found at the site has revealed traces of beer-like fermented beverages made from wild grains. This might be the earliest evidence of alcohol production in human history, not for everyday consumption, but specifically for ceremonial use. Imagine ancient shamans or spiritual leaders using these potent drinks to induce altered states of consciousness as part of their sacred rituals. The abundance of animal bones, particularly wild bulls, suggests ritual feasting on a massive scale. These weren't everyday meals, but special occasions where perhaps hundreds of people gathered to share food, stories, and participate in ceremonies that bound their communities together. Some archaeologists have even suggested that Göbekli Tepe may have been a site for funerary rituals, not a burial place itself, but somewhere the dead were prepared before final disposition elsewhere. The recurring vulture imagery throughout the site provides an intriguing hint at such practices. In later Anatolian cultures, vultures were closely associated with excarnation rituals, the practice of exposing dead bodies to birds of prey as a way of separating flesh from bone before final burial. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Göbekli Tepe as a temple is what it reveals about human priorities. Think about it, these hunter-gatherers didn't build permanent homes for themselves before building this temple. They didn't establish agricultural fields or defensive walls or storage facilities. The very first monumental structure they chose to invest their collective energy in was a sacred space, a place not for survival, but for meaning. This turns our understanding of civilization's development completely upside down. We've long believed that religion and monumental architecture came after the practicalities of agriculture and permanent settlement were established. Göbekli Tepe suggests exactly the opposite, that the human need for spiritual connection and communal ritual may have been the driving force that eventually led to settled life. Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a temple before temples, it was possibly the catalyst that transformed human society. As archaeologist Klaus Schmidt put it, first came the temple, then the city. This revolutionary idea suggests that our ancestors didn't start farming because they needed more food. They started farming because they needed to support the massive communal gatherings that centered around their temple. Today, when we look at these ancient stones, we're not just seeing an archaeological curiosity. We're witnessing the birthplace of a fundamental aspect of human civilization, the creation of sacred space. In these stone circles, our ancestors first expressed that uniquely human impulse to set apart certain places as bridges between the mundane and the divine, between the visible world and the invisible realms beyond. Every church, mosque, synagogue, and temple built in the 12 millennia since Göbekli Tepe stands as an echo of this first sacred space, a place where humans stepped beyond mere survival and reached for connection with something greater than themselves. Standing among the ancient pillars of Göbekli Tepe today, with the warm Turkish sun casting long shadows across stones that have witnessed 12 millennia of human history, you can't help but feel humbled. This isn't just an archaeological site. It's a profound lesson in humility for our modern civilization. For centuries, we've told ourselves a comfortable story about human progress, that we started as simple hunter-gatherers, barely surviving from day to day, until agriculture gave us the stability to develop more complex societies. We imagined our ancestors as primitive beings, their lives nasty, brutish, and short, their achievements limited by their circumstances. Göbekli Tepe shatters that narrative completely. The people who built these stone circles weren't simple or primitive. They were astronomers who could track celestial movements. They were artists who could render lifelike animals in hard stone. They were architects who could design spaces with specific acoustic properties. They were engineers who could move 10-ton monoliths across substantial distances without metal tools or wheel technology. And they were spiritual thinkers who conceived of symbolic representations that still resonate with us today. One of the most poignant aspects of Göbekli Tepe is that we don't know what these people called themselves. We don't know what language they spoke. We don't know what stories they told around their fires at night, or what songs they sang during their ceremonies. Their names, their faces, their personal histories, all lost to time. Yet, through the monumental work they left behind, they speak to us still, reminding us that human ingenuity is far older and far deeper than we ever imagined. Here's something truly remarkable to consider. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were closer in time to us than they were to the first human cave paintings at places like Chauvet Cave in France, created some 30,000 years before Christ. Yet they achieved a level of social organization that we once thought impossible without writing, without cities, without metals. There's a certain poetry in the fact that these ancient builders deliberately buried their creation. Layer upon layer of debris and soil was carefully placed over the stone circles in an act that appears intentional rather than accidental. It's as if they were sending their message in a time capsule, preserving it for a future they could never see, but somehow trusted would come. And now, here we are, their distant descendants, slowly and carefully uncovering what they so deliberately concealed. With each trowel scrape and brush stroke, archaeologists are revealing not just ancient stones, but ancient wisdom, a reminder that the human capacity for cooperation, creativity, and meaning-making runs deep in our collective DNA. Perhaps the most profound legacy of Göbekli Tepe is how it challenges us to reconsider what truly drives human progress. For generations, we've assumed that material needs, the search for food, shelter, safety, were the primary engines of innovation. But Göbekli Tepe suggests something different, that our ancestors were willing to invest enormous resources in projects that served spiritual and social needs rather than purely practical ones. This ancient site reminds us that humans have always been meaning-seeking creatures, driven not just by hunger or fear, but by wonder and awe. The desire to understand our place in the cosmos, to create beauty, to connect with something larger than ourselves. These impulses are not recent developments, but fundamental aspects of our humanity. When archaeologist Klaus Schmidt first began excavating Göbekli Tepe in the 1990s, one of his colleagues reportedly told him, "There's nothing there. We've checked." How wrong that assessment turned out to be. Beneath that seemingly unremarkable hill lay one of the most important archaeological discoveries of all time, a testament to human potential that had waited patiently for millennia to be rediscovered. In many ways, Göbekli Tepe is still teaching us, still challenging us. Each new excavation season brings fresh discoveries and new questions. Ground-penetrating radar surveys suggest that less than 10% of the site has been uncovered so far. What other wonders, what other revelations lie waiting beneath the soil? And perhaps that's the ultimate legacy of this forgotten civilization, to remind us of the dangers of assuming we know the full story of our past. If we could be so wrong about what our ancestors were capable of 11,000 years ago, what other chapters of human history might we be misunderstanding? What other achievements have we overlooked or underestimated? Göbekli Tepe stands as a monument not just to those ancient builders, but to human potential itself, to our capacity for cooperation, for creativity, for finding meaning in the cosmos. It teaches us that the fundamental qualities we value in ourselves, curiosity, artistry, spirituality, technical ingenuity, aren't recent developments, but ancient birthrights, passed down through countless generations. These silent stones speak a profound truth across the millennia. Never underestimate what humans can achieve when inspired by something beyond mere survival. Our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were thriving, creating and reaching for the stars long before we gave them credit for such aspirations. As our journey through the ancient world of Göbekli Tepe comes to a close, take a moment to truly absorb what we've discovered together. These aren't just weathered stones scattered across a Turkish hillside. They're not merely interesting artifacts from a bygone era. What stands before us is nothing less than a profound testimony to the extraordinary human capacity to dream, to create, and to transcend the limitations of their time. Think about it. 12,000 years ago, while much of humanity was still following herds and gathering wild plants, a group of our ancestors paused in their nomadic existence to create something that had no practical purpose for survival. They quarried massive stones, carved them with intricate symbols, and arranged them in precise circles aligned with the heavens. They didn't do this because they had to. They did it because something within the human spirit called them to reach beyond the everyday, to touch something eternal. In many ways, we are still reaching for the same stars today. The impulses that drove those ancient builders to understand our place in the cosmos, to create beauty, to gather in community, to mark our brief existence with something that outlasts us, these remain fundamental aspects of what makes us human. Perhaps that's the most beautiful legacy of Göbekli Tepe. It reminds us that we are heirs to a human story far richer, far more complex, and far more surprising than we ever imagined. Our ancestors weren't simple creatures stumbling through a harsh existence. They were thoughtful, creative beings with rich interior lives, capable of extraordinary achievements even without modern technology. The story of Göbekli Tepe is still being written. Even now, archaeologists are carefully uncovering new sections of this ancient wonder. With less than 10% of the site excavated, who knows what further revelations await beneath the soil? What other assumptions about our past might be overturned in the coming years? This ancient site teaches us a profound lesson about humility. Just as the builders of Göbekli Tepe would likely be astonished by our modern world of smartphones and skyscrapers, we find ourselves humbled by what they accomplished with stone tools and cooperative effort. We are connected across the millennia by that uniquely human spark, the drive to create meaning, to build community, and to leave something of ourselves for future generations to discover. The next time someone tells you that progress is inevitable, that earlier peoples were simpler or less capable, remember the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe. Remember the hands that carved those magnificent pillars. Remember the minds that conceived of those mysterious symbols. Remember that the human story is not a straight line from primitive to advanced, but a complex tapestry of innovation, creativity, and wonder that stretches back into the mists of time. We stand today as the inheritors of that legacy, with the responsibility to recognize and honor the full depth of our human journey. After all, in another 12,000 years, what will our descendants think when they look back at what we've created? What stones are we setting in place for them to discover? If you've enjoyed this exploration of humanity's ancient past, please hit that like button, share this video with friends who appreciate the wonders of history, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel for more content about prehistoric civilizations and the fascinating origins of human culture. Until our next adventure through time, remember that the past is never as simple as we think, and our ancestors have always been just as human as we are today.